First up is Aimee talking about difficult DevOps decisions.
Great, thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'm excited to be here and share with you a little bit about what I do for DevOps. I'm very passionate about DevOps, and I have been practicing DevOps since around 2013. And once I put in my first pipeline, I was hooked. Like most people, I got to see the benefits. I got to see people that I worked with for many years get nights and weekends back. And from there, I took it and I grew and developed into a DevOps transformational leader is what I would consider myself, or a DevOps strategist. And to give you context, I mostly work with large enterprise organizations looking to adopt DevOps. And I often hear, you know, we want to compete with startups and we want to have like a startup culture and we want to be DevOps. And a lot of times it means something very different. And as I work with these enterprises and these organizations, I help them make some of the difficult decisions and develop that strategy and then shift that strategy into a tactical or executable plan. This is the first time I have done this talk and have put this together. So you're seeing a beta version. And what I would really like is feedback. What resonated? Where do you wish that I went in deeper? What didn't you understand and I need to be clearer about? I would love that feedback. So I appreciate you being sort of a test audience. One of the first decisions that I see companies and organizations struggle with is, you know, let's do that. Are we going to do this? Are we going to become a DevOps organization? And everybody, they all want the pipeline, right? Everybody wants CI/CD and they want to put in that tool chain, but they really don't think about what it means to really adopt the culture part, to change team topologies, to get the skill sets in, you know, decide whether you're going in on the cloud. And, you know, these are some of the questions that in conversations when I'm talking to these organizations, as to whether they're making that decision, disruption being one of the biggest ones. They are threatened by startups, or potentially they're just disrupting themselves. I work at S&P Global. I'm the head of DevOps and Cloud Engineering Enablement. And there's businesses within S&P that there's such a high bar for entry in stock indexes and ratings that, you know, they don't necessarily have to be DevOps because the competition really can't beat them right now. You have to have funding. You have to have really strong change leadership. You have to be risk tolerant and accept some of the risks that you're going to take and that you might fail at some points and make some bad decisions. You have to slow down to go fast. I don't think a lot of people realize that in order to put pipelines in, you have to sort of throttle back on feature development. You have to be an organization that can be patient and persevere. I've seen teams or departments within side just bail because they felt once they hit the bottom of the J curve of change, it was wrong and they couldn't push through. Are you in a burnout environment? People work in multiple hours where if you put a CI/CD pipeline in and you changed your teams and your culture, that they would be able to get value added time back and focus on just innovation. Agile practices. I think a lot of companies haven't matured their agile practices and then wonder why when they adopt DevOps and the people, the process, and the technologies, why it's not working. That I think is foundational. So these are, you know, some of the questions they get asked, and rightfully so, because when you're a legacy company or you've been working in with a lot of legacy systems and you have old ways of working and you have what I consider like lots of acquisitions that have made things even more complicated, we're asking our people to change everything they know about how software is developed, delivered, and operated. And that's a big undertaking. And I'm not sure a lot of companies understand, depending on the size and the magnitude, that that's what they're signing up for. One of the things I ask is, why do you want to do this? Know your purpose, and that always have that at the forefront of it helps you sustain that course and path. I've worked at 3 significantly large companies leading DevOps adoptions and transformations. One of them, they were one of the top companies to work for. Fortune magazine made the top 100 list. It was a federally funded quasi-government organization. They had no competition. They weren't looking to disrupt. They really weren't looking to be a startup feel, but they wanted to live up to the reputation and reduce burnout. And they put in DevOps and eliminated the silos between Dev and Ops just for the humaneness. Like we call it humane IT. It's one of the reasons why I do DevOps. The second one, big financial company, had to disrupt. They were always going to be at risk of disruption, and they wanted to be able to innovate and keep pace and outpace the market. And then finally, some organization that just wanted to disrupt themselves, be more efficient, move faster, and felt that a DevOps culture would reduce silos, handoffs, and make it a better, more well-managed organization and reduce waste. People strategy. One of the first things we start talking about is who's going to help us? How are we going to do this? Do we use consultants and hire outside people from the market, hired outside talent? Do we convert existing talent, or do we do all of the above? The answer is all of the above. You use a combination of professional services, hiring people from the outside, and upskilling your existing talent. The reason why I like to see, or how I like to see companies use for some reason, not even touching my keyboard, but it's auto advancing. I'm not sure why. Professional services, I just even put in a statement of work for where I am right now. Bring an outside organization to come in and do an assessment, do the strategy and plan, and then use some of their expertise to start with the seed team that you co-create, and they bring a coach, and then that jump starts at least one team that you can use that will pay it forward with other teams within the organization. And then hire people from the outside, but for a master apprentice. I talk about establishing that seed team where you have a mix of masters that take the coach from the outside, a mix of masters that you've hired from the outside, and some apprentices and people that are converting and want to do this from within side. And then upskilling, individual learning paths, team immersions and challenges. So I say team immersions and challenges. One of my favorite models, if you're familiar with a dojo, is what I've seen be most effective for getting teams into the DevOps mindset and practices and behaviors, is running a dedicated focus challenge for at least 6 weeks, where they're ring fenced and not competing with other priorities. And that's all they focus on is their DevOps adoption, agile, and any new technical skills. And then take those seed teams and propagate them forward and have them pair with other teams. Toolchains, probably hardest decision. The mental gymnastics that we go through, and I see people go through in organizations to decide on Toolchains and how they're going to implement them and support them, is probably the long pole in the tent in a DevOps adoption. You got a whole suite of things on the left. You got a saturated market. You have to look at your skill sets. You have to decide, for example, if you're working in an enterprise and you have multiple divisions, you have to decide if you're going to be more of a meritocracy, holacracy. Are you going to support all of this centralized and be a platform? Or are you going to let it be more federated? Do you buy an integrated platform? Or do you buy like a single platform that's already comes integrated, something like GitLab, or do you buy individual tool chains? What I've mostly seen is that the pockets of tool chains live in different parts of the organization, and I see more integration. But I did just work with a company that did go with a fully integrated platform. They didn't feel that they had the engineering skill sets on the inside to really support and integrate a tool chain. And when I talk about enterprise divisional, and I put this slide here because I'm going through this right now. At S&P, we have 4 divisions, and we have then a corporate IT department with networking and infrastructure and other cross-divisional aspects. And each of our lines of business have a tool chain that they like. Some are using Jenkins, some are in GitHub, some are using Azure DevOps and Git. And everybody feels that their tool chain's better than the other, but we're wasting some money. And there's an opportunity to explore whether we want to do an enterprise versus a divisional capability. And this is literally what the CIO is using to make those decisions, and working with the CTOs in each of the divisions to decide what we're going to make common capabilities and that they are going to offer at a federate across the enterprise. This is an example of where we are right now with our tool chain, and where we're targeting. It's a lot. We went with the we're going to integrate our own tool chain. We didn't go with a single platform. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of this come together and seeing a developer commit code and go to customer within a matter of a day, rather than it's about 6 weeks right now. So I wanted to share this with you in case you were interested in how a company like S&P is and what they're looking at. What do we start with? Who do we start with? How do we get started? So now you've got the tools, you are skilling your people, you've got the resources. Do we start with a greenfield product team or a legacy that's sitting in an on-prem and we want to re-platform into the cloud? I think we all, other than the tool chain, the other thing that we all get analysis paralysis around is where we're starting and how. This is a tool that I use, a decision analysis, and we just recently used this within my division of where picking a product team, picking a team that we're going to go quote make DevOps, and we're going to embed ops functions into them, and we're going to give them this new tool chain that we have stood up, and we're going to get them to be able to release on demand. And we looked at 3 different teams. 1 was a greenfield product and 2 were legacy products that we're going to migrate out of on-prem and from a physical data center into the cloud. And these are the things that we looked at to make those decisions. Is this product have long-term value? Like, are we investing in this product and that we're committing to it and enhancing it for revenue? Is it a representative tech stack? Like, we're not going to go and I think put a C+ app out there, right? We're going to look at whether it's a Java. We have a lot of .NET at S&P, and that's what we're going to target. And there has to be a high frequency of volume of change. I mean, that's why we're putting this system in. Innovative, high-performing team. The team that we're working with has to want this. To be open to change. They need to be learners and willing to fail and work at a consistent pace. And one of the most important things, though this got deprioritized, is that their middle management and their product management is bought in. Product management is really important because if they're the ones prioritizing the backlog, but they're not giving the development of the pipeline or containers or any of that, and they're not giving that any weight in time for the team to do that in the backlog, you will move at a snail's pace. So we wanted to make sure the business was bought in and supportive and creating space and time for the team to do this. We landed on a legacy product, innovative team. We gave them a coach and 2 experts or masters, and we lifted and shifted an app out of the cloud and on-prem and refactored it and put it in through the pipeline. And it was honestly, it was about 3 months until they were rapidly delivering. Do we reorg the teams or change the reporting structure? So one of the conversations that I repeatedly have with organizations is what the true essence or meaning of what DevOps is. And I think it gets forgotten that the core or foundation of DevOps is the elimination of that silo between Dev and Ops, where you're not having handoffs to ops, and there's not a competing incentives between dev for quality and ops for reliability and stability. But nobody really knows how to make that happen. And we look at a couple of different options of how we can eliminate those silos. And there's 3 options that are, I would say, the most common. There's more, but these are some of the most common. And that's, you got your, what I consider an agile dev team with a dotted line with some ops resources that can automate infrastructure and support them in cross-skilling that would align to their team, but they would still report to a ops manager, potentially creating conflict between priorities from the dev team, and that's the drawback to this one. The second one is the DevOps team. The ops people are embedded, they're sharing a backlog with that team, and that enabler work and tech and maintenance work is in that backlog, but we still haven't changed the reporting structure. So I call this embedded, but with a dotted line. And then the third one is you build it, you own it. This is that, 2-piece team. It's a lot of people equate this to what Amazon does and Facebook and a lot of the startups or tech companies, where it's a full stack, T-shaped engineering team. They develop it, deliver it, operate it. They wear the pager, and they own end to end that application, soup to nuts, cradle to grave, code to customer. Problem is if you're in a legacy system and you're a legacy organizational structure, to go to something like number 3 is a pretty drastic emotional change and can cause, I would say, a lot of strife in an organization. So if we were to do similar to, if you're familiar with HGTV's House Hunters, and we're trying to decide how you wanted to go and start standing up teams to move into a DevOps team topology, some of the decision factors that we look at are, what's going to minimize disruption. Like if you're not willing as a leader to tolerate the disruption to your staff by changing that reporting structure, you probably want to look at 1 or 2. And if you're looking at what's driving collective ownership, one of the key elements of DevOps, you probably want to look at 2 or 3. Optimizing for flow, right? That's where are we going to get the best flow? And then a 4th factor is cognitive load. If we're putting ops functions into a team and we want people to start owning the application end to end and understanding ops and ops understanding dev, it's a lot of cognitive load. And at the same time, if you're adopting Agile, the cloud, DevOps, you might want to consider how that's going to impact your team and how you do roles and responsibilities. I have to say, the company I just worked for, an organization inside that company that was adopting Agile and DevOps, went straight to number 3. You had 2 completely separate siloed, and they said, you know what, we're pulling the Band-Aid off. And they put in a whole support system to help them transition. It was bold, it worked, it was emotional, and I would say that it cut the team forming, norming time in half. So it just depends on the organization and their tolerance. But there is no such thing as the perfect org structure or team topology. I think that's important to remember, but there are such things as bad org structures and topologies. And a siloed org structure, and an org structure that lends itself, if you're familiar with Conway's law, where the application starts to take on the architecture of that communication structure and there's tight coupling, something to really be thinking about as you look to structure around a DevOps culture and organization. Retreat, reset, revisit. So they've got the team, they've got the tools, they're up and running, their operating model, they think they're moving towards being a DevOps organization, but they're not seeing results. So on the right-hand side, if you're familiar with the State of DevOps report that comes out every year, I think now it's put out by Google and the DevOps Research Association. And they have this great table to give you an idea if you're an elite organization or you're not. And if you look at this table and you see yourselves landing still after you've done all of this between low and medium, then it's time to take a step back and ask yourself, okay, what are we doing? Do we bail, or do we need a reset, or do we need to revisit our strategy? And some of the questions you might ask are on the left-hand side. I would say one of the things that really holds teams or organizations from truly being able to adopt DevOps is leadership changes and org changes, and going and doing an acquisition and directing resources to the expansion of the business. There's a lot of reasons to set organizations back, but I would say reorgs and leadership changes are the two main contributing factors. So don't stop, don't retreat, just adjust your expectations. The company that I was just at for 4 years, they just every year had success criteria that they had established, and by a time they wanted to establish, and they just changed the year and they owned it and said, you know what, we're not there yet, but we're still on that journey and we'll get there. So I think the most important decision to make is to commit to this. If you've read the Phoenix Project, or you're familiar with Gene Kim and his 3 ways, I think it's flow, feedback, I forget what the third one is. There's another 3 ways. To me, it's persist, perspire, and persevere. And you gotta push through the change. But in order to push through that change, you gotta remember your why. Why are you doing this? Is it for the market, disruption? Is it for your people, humane IT? And then I would suggest having your success criteria defined to know where you are on that journey. This is the success criteria that I have established and I have used with organizations to put a stake in the ground and say, we are a DevOps organization with a DevOps culture. And it's collective ownership, the essence of DevOps, for that quality, reliability, availability, and performance for its full life cycle. That these teams can rapidly experiment and release high quality software at any pace and any time without disruption. And they can restore the application and its environment with a single command. And that concludes my presentation. I think I did okay with the 20 minutes, or did I go over?
No, that was great. Thank you very much, Aimee. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one from Anthony. So how often do you see companies try to do like partial DevOps implementations? So much like companies do partial agile adoptions, and how often do you see these succeed in your experience?
That's a good question. I see pockets within companies of teams that are full on agile in DevOps, and then I see pockets where they're not. So that doesn't give you a single answer, and you're going to see this anywhere. You're just going to see pockets of maturity and levels of adoption different across teams. Every team, every org has its own culture even.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And another one is, how difficult is it to get business buy-in to almost transfer to DevOps? And do you think the size of the company or what the company does makes a difference? And in your experience, which companies are best suited to a DevOps adoption, or where would you find the most resistance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because that's a loaded question. The companies that I see who will lend themselves to DevOps are ones that are younger, with less legacy, less acquisitions, the ones that are willing to convert their talent and take the risk. And when it's coming from the top down. When it's coming from the CEO and the CIO, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's a commitment there and they're successful. The companies that I have seen struggle are the ones like I described, with the legacy, leadership changes, not willing to put in the time and effort. The product management, the business, I see this as a real struggle. Product managers in the business don't want to slow down feature development, and they're incentivized on it. So if your product manager isn't giving the team the time to invest in enablement work or reducing tech debt, it'll be very difficult and you won't be successful. It is rare. They're the rare gems of product managers of the business that want DevOps and want to do this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Aimee. Any more questions for Aimee, do put them on the Q&A section. Aimee will be able to answer them as the other talks continue.